Hello everybody, my name is Kumar. Welcome to my channel, Nomad on Cloud. This is my first video, so please share your constructive feedback regarding the content. In this video, I will be covering the CI/CD implementation for Azure Databricks. The agenda for this video is a brief introduction on Azure Databricks CI/CD implementation, repository structure, how the artifacts built by development team will be placed within the repository, that is GitHub. I will also be walking through the build pipeline, followed by a walkthrough of release pipeline. Finally, a working solution demo. Without any further delay, let's start. Let's start with the introduction to CI/CD for Azure Databricks. In a traditional software development process, CI/CD is defined as the process of developing and delivering software frequently by using automation pipelines. For Azure Databricks, CI/CD is defined as the process of developing and delivering notebooks and libraries frequently by using automation pipelines. Software is replaced with notebooks and libraries for Azure Databricks. This is a very short intro which gives an idea on what artifacts are involved in Azure Databricks CI/CD. Now, the next topic, repository structure. For seamless CI/CD, the basics is to define and adhere to standards at every step which is part of CI/CD. One among them is source code repository. In our case, this is the structure which we are recommending. In our repository, we have three folders. The first one, CI/CD scripts. This folder is dedicated for DevOps team. Developers should refrain from contributing or committing any of their codes within the CI/CD scripts folder. The second folder, notebooks. All the notebook files which the developer wants to deploy on Azure Databricks workspace needs to be placed within the notebooks folder. The third one, the package folder. This folder is also again for developers to place their libraries. If they are building any wheel files or any jar files, they have to place that within this package folder. Next topic, build pipeline walkthrough. Let's get into our Azure DevOps portal. Go to the build pipelines. We have a Databricks demo build pipeline. Click on the same. Get into the edit mode. As you can see here, Azure-pipelines.yaml is the file which is used to define the build pipeline. This file is also stored in the root directory of the Git repository. Now, what have we defined within the Azure-pipelines.yaml? Let's see. The first three lines are comments, so let's ignore that. Fifth and sixth line, trigger. We are defining the trigger, that is, any commit on the main branch of the Databricks-demo repository will trigger the build pipeline 8th and 9th line pool name hosted Ubuntu 16.04. We are going to use Microsoft hosted Ubuntu 16.04 agent to execute the steps defined in the build pipeline. What are the steps? So the steps are defined in the steps section, as you can see below. So the first step, what we are executing in the build pipeline is install Python. This version should match the version on the Databricks cluster. How can I validate that? Go to the Databricks workspace, click on the clusters, select the cluster, go to the advanced options. As you can see in the environment variable, it is using Python 3. Once we install the Python, the next step is to install the required Python modules, which is a must for the build to succeed, like PyTest, requests, setup tools, wheel, Databricks Connect. So Databricks Connect is a Spark client library which is used by build agent to connect to Databricks cluster and execute Spark code. Now the fifth step is to connect to the Databricks. How are we connecting? Environment variables. These are the environment variables. Where have we configured this environment variables? It is configured in the variable sections. As you can see here, workspace region URL, workspace region URL. This contains the Databricks workspace URL. Okay. Now the next one, CSE develop pat. This is nothing but personal access token. Where can I get that? Within the user settings, under access token tab, we can generate the token, and that token will be leveraged by Databricks Connect to connect to the Databricks workspace or cluster. So that is the PAT token, and this should be safeguarded in a key vault. Since this is a demo, I've kept it in plain text. The next one, existing cluster ID. So where will I get this value? Again, go to the clusters section, click on the cluster, advanced options, tags. As you can see here, the cluster ID. This is what is configured in the existing cluster ID. Workspace org ID. Where would I get this? This value can be found in the URL, as you can see here, and also in the query parameter. Fine. So all this environment variables are sent as input to the Databricks Connect so that we can connect to our Databricks workspace or cluster. Now the sixth step. This is used to download the latest code from the designated branch, that is from the main branch in our case. All the latest code, whatever is placed in this repository, is going to be checked out and downloaded. Now, the seventh step. The seventh step is about packaging the library code. The code whatever is placed within the package folder of the repository. As you can see here, this setup.python file is leveraged in this section to package the library. Now, the 8th step. Here we are packaging the artifacts like library, notebooks, CI/CD scripts, etc., and placing it within binary directories folder, right? And then the 9th step, we are going to compress the binary directory folder, zip it, and name it with a build ID. This file will be generated, and then this file is published as an artifact under the Databricks build section. To visually demonstrate the same, as you can see here, this is one of the build which got succeeded. As you can see here, one of the artifact is published, and as you can see, Databricks build. This is nothing but this value. Under this one, we have the build ID dot zip. That is nothing but the build ID dot zip. Okay. And what is within this zip file? As you can see here, within the 64.zip, CI/CD scripts, notebooks, and packages folder are created. As you can see here, this is the folder CI/CD scripts, right? And then package, right? So these are the folders which got created. And what is that libs folder? What you see here? This is where the wheel library which we want to install within our Databricks cluster will be placed. So these are the artifacts which we have published as the output of build pipeline. Next topic, release pipeline walkthrough. Let's again get into our Azure DevOps portal. This time we'll get into our release pipelines. We already have a pipeline called Databricks demo. Sorry, now we are in the release pipeline, and as you can see here, I've named it very badly, new release pipeline. Let's get into the edit mode. Now, in the artifacts section, as you can see here, I'm taking the artifacts which I published in the build pipeline Databricks demo as the input for my release pipeline. Using this as the input, I'm going to perform 6 tasks within the release. What are those 6 tasks? Again, what agent I'm going to use? Here, I'm using a Microsoft hosted Visual Studio 2017 Windows 2016 agent. Okay, this is the agent which is going to execute and perform the release, and it is going to use the Databricks demo build pipelines artifacts as the input. Now, the first task what I perform is again install Python. Again, I'm going to install the Python version which is the same as Databricks cluster. The next step, extract files. As you can see here, the artifacts which got generated in the build pipeline were zipped. As you can see here, So this zip I'm going to extract in this task. Once I extract, the next task is about installing the Python modules which are mandatory for our release pipeline to succeed. Here we need only request. Once this Python module is installed, the next step is to deploy notebooks to our Databricks workspace. As you can see here, my Databricks cluster is configured in the South Central US region, and within the artifacts folder, as you are all aware, the notebooks folder, whatever notebooks we have, those notebooks will be placed in the shared workspace. What is shared workspace? As you can see here, this is the workspace where these files will be placed after successful execution of the release pipeline. And we are again passing the personal access token. The same token which I had configured in the build pipeline is configured in the release pipeline variable section, as you can see here. Again, this is a very confidential information which should be safeguarded in a key vault. Since this is a demo, I'm just keeping it as a plain text. Now, with this inputs, this task is going to perform the activity of deploying the notebooks to the shared workspace. Now, the next task, Databricks DBFS file deployment. As you can see here, again, the region where my Databricks workspace or cluster is installed is in the South Central US region. As you can see here, the packages libs folder 64 package libs. The content within this folder, the wheel file and the tar file, both the files are taken. As you can see here, any file pattern, whatever is the extension, we are taking everything and placing it in the libs folder. How can I validate that? Now, if I get into this one, test. Now let us try to run this script. Run cell. It is trying to attach the cluster so that it can perform the execution of this command. Let's hold on for a minute. Yes, it is executing now. As you can see here, whatever files I showed you, the tar and the wheel file, you can find it here. This is the wheel file and this is the tar file, right? So whatever was in the libs folder, as you can see, whatever was in the libs folder, this is the libs folder, these two files, any pattern, I'm okay with tar, I'm okay with WHL. I pick all the files and I put it into the /libs folder, and I have shown you how to validate also whether this files got successfully copied into our Databricks DBFS path. And again, the input for the same is CSC QA pat. This is again the personal access token, which I've already explained. Now the final step, install library on cluster. Here, as you can see here, when we went through the repository section, I explained that this CI/CD scripts folder is dedicated for the DevOps team. We have placed a Python file called install wheel library. This file takes these arguments like workspace, path token, cluster ID, and the libs path and the DBFS path. The DBFS path is nothing but the slash libs. And as you can see, this environment variables are configured in the variable section. As you can see here, slash libs, cluster ID, the URL, and the path token. These values will be passed as argument for this wheel library Python file, and it is going to perform the activity of installing the wheel. The wheel which you are seeing here, this wheel would be installed within the cluster. Where it will be installed, you can go to this libraries and you should be able to see this wheel file getting installed. If the status is installed, that means our release pipeline ran successfully without any issues. So this completes our release pipeline implementation. Now let's get into our demo. As you can see here, I'm using Jupyter notebooks. I've created a simple notebook file here where I have a simple print command, one more hello world. Okay, when I execute, it's working fine. I've downloaded this file. Let me download again. Download as notebook, IPYNB, show in folder, Control X. Now I'm going to place it within my repository. Okay, replace the file. Now this is my clone of the repository which you see here. Okay, this is the repository which I have cloned on my local disk. Now since I've added a new file called onemore.ipynb, I'm going to check in the same to the repository. Okay, let me show you what is the status. As you can see here, one file has got added, one more .ipynb. Now I'm going to add it. Then what is the status? It has been pushed now to the staging. Now let's commit it with saying added one more .ipynb file. Okay, now I'm going to push it to the remote, that is main. As you can see here, this is going to push it to the repository. Once this is pushed, you can see here added one more .ipynb file. Now when we go to our pipelines and then build pipeline, this is going to be immediately triggering the continuous build, because any commit on the main branch of the Databricks-demo repository is going to trigger the build pipeline. Now the job is running, 0 artifacts generated. Let's get into the job. Python got installed. Now we are loading the dependencies. As you can see here, Databricks Connect and then it is connecting to the Databricks Connect, then checking out all the files from the latest branch, that is the main branch. Once the checkout is complete, it built the Python library, all the changes, published the artifacts. Okay, now let's get back. And as you can see here, one of the artifacts got generated. The artifact is 65.zip. Since I have configured continuous deployment, this pipeline should be immediately triggered. Let's see whether the trigger got. Yes, as you can see here, release 30 is initiated. Now the 65.zip is used as an input, and all the 6 tasks which we discussed will be performed. Waiting for Azure pipeline. It's in the queued stage. Now it is in the in progress state. Now the agent, the Microsoft hosted agent, is allocated to perform the task of deploying the notebooks and the libraries to the Databricks cluster. As you can see here, the download artifacts is done. Python got installed, then the zip file was extracted, then the request pip install was executed, and then the Databricks notebooks deployment is getting executed. Connecting via bearer, that is the PAT token. Now the notebook deployment got succeeded. Now we are doing the Databricks DBFS deployment. It is going to place the wheel file in the libs folder. And that got succeeded. Now the wheel file which we had placed in the CI/CD scripts folder is executing and installing the wheel file to our cluster. Still it's running. Let's log in the meantime. Now the Python wheel file got installed again. Successfully, and that's the reason as you can see here, since it is showing the status as installed, hence, you can see here, it is reflecting that it was able to install it successfully. And then the finalizing and closing of the release pipeline. This completes our demo of how to implement CI/CD for Azure Databricks. Hope this content was quite informative. Once again, thank you for watching and share your constructive feedbacks if any. Thanks a lot.